Okay, so welcome to the English Mixed Martial Arts Association. This is a big one. It's a pleasure to have you with me, Jack. Want to welcome you, the creator and series director of The Good Fight Club, the MMA documentary that follows inspiring young MMA athletes as they try to make their way from Team Underground in South London to the pinnacle of the sport. Obviously, our very own former Team England athlete and the first ever Four Nations female champion, Shanelle Dyer, is heavily featured in the doc, and it offers an incredible insight into her career. So yeah, Jack, it's a pleasure to have you, and it's definitely worth the watch. First of all, but it's a pleasure to have you, mate.
Mate, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So how long was this process before we get into the nuts and bolts and Emma's involvement, etc.? When did this idea first come to you? Because Team Underground develops a story of its own with Steve and everything like that. How did you envision this coming about, and where did it all start?
Well, so I was actually, it goes back about 3 years, the full story. So I was filming, well, sorry, not filming. I was training at Team Underground myself. I was doing jiu-jitsu. I tried a few MMA classes, but to be honest, I'm a bit older and that wasn't for me. But I was loving doing jiu-jitsu, but it kept getting interrupted around the pandemic time. And I've been working in TV for years already. And I thought, I just got this sense that there was like a really interesting group of people there, all finding a kind of meaning and a sort of salvation, some of them in this sport and in this group as well, not just the sport, but also the kind of community of that gym. And I thought there's probably some sort of interesting documentary to be made there. And I actually, when it first started, I got some camera kit and I started filming with them like on and off for about 6 months, but just on my own. This was unfunded. A lot of my contracts have been delayed because of COVID. So I had a bit of extra time. And then I actually went out to do a job like filming out in Canada, and I was locked in a hotel room, got quarantined because of COVID.
Okay, yeah,
14,
bubbles.
yeah. I was there for 14 days. And I had all this footage, and I just sat, locked in this room for 2 weeks, and I just edited it till I made this 10-minute taster, which sold the project and what it would be, and so like a pilot almost. And that was sent out to Sky, and that's what was commissioned as a 4-part series. So that's how it all started. But that's a long process.
Yeah. How do you pitch the sport of MMA to Sky? Because obviously BT have UFC. That's kind of besides the point, but it's still an undervalued sport, underappreciated, and it's seen in a lot of people's eyes. I think it's mentioned in part in the documentary as well as just a really aggressive sport. And people who are involved are just, I don't know, rude or ignorant. But it's not that. It's called the Good Fight Club because there are a lot of good people in the sport. How did you pitch that idea to Sky that it's not all just rough nutheads or rude, whatever it is, people?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right, because I think Sky had to. I can't speak for them, but I do feel like, I don't think the commissioners are MMA fans, So I think there was definitely, that was something they obviously needed to sort of wrap their heads around. I think the taster itself, you saw this group of people, in that taster, you've got Steve, you've got Chloe. There were other people in it as well. There were girls, probably like 50-50 girls, boys. You had Thomas, and I think to be honest, what would have sold it would have actually been those people, and the sort of, I think you could see from that, that taster started out with people talking about what MMA and that club has done for them. So it sort of led on this human story. It's a character-led piece essentially, and the sport is, in some ways, you could substitute MMA for. It could have been cricket, but at the same time, because it was MMA, I think it took a bit of persuading, and I'm sure there was some internal conversations that went on about, is this a sport that we kind of want to cover? Because Sky also don't cover MMA, like you said, it's BT Sport. So I think the taster, that group of people, and we had some meetings where we had to sort of try and sell it in, and I would have explained those things as well, that it's not what you think. And MMA fight, I spent the whole of last year touring around all the UK MMA scene, and the MMA fighters and coaches are like the nicest people I've met, and I remember the series producer who didn't know anything about MMA said exactly the same thing. It surprises you that group. And I somehow, through a combination of the taster conversations we had and the people in it, I think we managed to convince them in the end.
How did Emma fit into the script then, or the storyline?
So Shanelle was obviously one of the lead characters, Shanelle Dyer, and she was in her sort of final amateur year. And she had set herself the goal through, and her agents who were, she was trying to get signed at the time with Paradigm, I think, which is in the documentary. And their advice to her, which I know is in line with the sort of Emma philosophy, was don't rush to go pro, get as much experience as you can, win an amateur world title, IMAFs and the Four Nations, and then go pro, like get your practice in, get your training. Once don't rush to earn 500 quid at a local show. If you can, build your skills and your experience through the amateur ranks. So that became her journey across the documentary, which I won't say what happens at the end, but the Four Nations is the final, is her final scene, is her competing at the Four Nations. Molly McCann in her corner. And it was a great scene and a great sort of ending for her story.
Yeah, definitely. I like the way you kind of go into the family home and get the audience familiar with her background, her family, and stuff like that as well.
Yeah. I mean that process is that was key really to the series. Was again, like it goes out on Sky. Well, it went out on Sky Max or whatever used to be Sky One. It went out on that channel, but it lives on the Sky Documentaries channel. It's not a Sky Sports program, so it was always going to be, human stories first, and what they get through the sport and find through the sport. So you have to have both. So that's why you're always in there with the families and getting to know the backstories. We wanted it to get to be a situation where once they get in the cage, you're so invested in them, you're worried for them, or you're, how you might feel watching your friend, or how family members feel when they watch their son or daughter fight in MMA. That's how we wanted the audience to feel when someone like Shanelle stepped in.
So to kind of touch a little bit more on the Shanelle side of things, then how did you come to the decision that you wanted to pick her to be involved in the documentary? Why Shanelle?
Well, I think Shanelle just stood out from the start. She stood out at that gym. She was one of the top. Excuse me. She was one of their sort of top fighters. For one, she's got a good. She's funny. She's a big member of the team. She's really sort of tight with everyone. And so what it's like. You go into any group and certain people just stand out, regardless of their sporting ability. And she stood out for both her MMA ability and her personality. And so she just immediately sort of stuck out as someone that we should put front and center of the film. And we also had a sense that she would go far, that her journey would, she would continue to grow. And it would be an exciting story to follow. So, it was, I think.
Yeah, it's a good idea. I like the relationship between Thomas and Steve as well. Talk a little bit about that and how that developed, obviously, with him going to Sweden and Las Vegas, etc.
Yeah. So I mean, it's hard not to do spoilers because all this people probably know exactly what happened anyway. I won't say what happens at the end of episode 4, but Thomas ends up in Las Vegas, fighting on Dana White's Contender Series. I mean, that in itself was like for observational documentaries like that one. People are slow to commission them sometimes because you don't know what's going to happen. Yeah, so you didn't. We had no way of knowing that Thomas was going to get called up to Dana White Contender Series and fight in Las Vegas. I mean, it was such a blessing, it was such good luck. Well, good luck on our part, but hard work on his and Steve's, obviously. But we didn't know that was going to happen. So I was in Sweden because Thomas was preparing for a fight on Golden Ticket.
Yeah.
He was going to try defend his belt because I think there'd been whispers from the UFC that they were curious about him. And he thought, I'll get one big win on this, and then I might get a shot. So I was out in Sweden filming with him at All Stars Gym, and then Steve called me and was like midnight almost. He was like, "Mate, you're not going to believe what's happened." He's like, "The biggest news." I was like, "What? The biggest news?" Anyway, and he's like, "Thomas Paul's been selected for Dana White's Contender Series, etc., etc." So we actually ended up planning. Steve was like, he wanted to tell Thomas in person. And I was like, right, just, wait till you get to Sweden. So he flew out to Sweden, and we had, it was a whole little operation because we needed, we didn't want Thomas to know, and neither did Steve. Steve wanted to surprise him by just turning up. And it happened to be that his training partners, it was his birthday. So he sort of said, oh, let's go for drinks put some beers in the park. And I'm there like, Steve, are you there? Are you there? Are you there? Are you in position? And then they went into the park, and then he spots him, and that's that great moment where he tells Thomas he's going to fight in Vegas.
Brilliant. Well, we'll leave the spoilers there, but overall, it was a great documentary. How did you feel with the whole premiere and it being released, etc., after the long period of production process, etc.?
Yeah, it's funny because it takes so long. It was, like I said, it was we spent the whole of 22 filming and editing it, and then we delivered it in about Christmas time, and then nothing happened for 6 months. We didn't even know when it was going to come out, and then we found out in late May it's going to come out on June 24th, and it also got into Sheffield Documentary Festival. So there's sort of like there's two sides to that answer. One is like I was very relieved that the fighters were happy with the film, because they're my friends. They were my friends before the film, and with TV and stuff, it can run away with you sometimes, because you've got various different actors and players who might want to spin a story a certain way. And I was really, that's a scary thing when it's your friends, and it can you want to represent them authentically and in a way that they're happy with. But we had a very good team from like top to bottom, and that those things never became a problem. And I was so it was a big relief to me that they enjoyed the film. And if someone was a main character in an episode, we actually showed it to them before we sort of finalized everything, in case they had any like big objections or factual errors or anything like that. And a lot of TV companies wouldn't do that. They're just like, we're in control of your narrative now.
Signed off sort of thing.
Yeah, not that anyone had any big complaints at all. But anyway, so that was great that they liked it, and then it was great it got into Sheffield Documentary Festival. It's a very like prestigious film festival, and it was great to watch it in a room with a crowded room of people who didn't know them and didn't just the public, and they laughed along, they cheered along, and it was a very interactive sort of screening, and so that was great. And then a week later it came out. Although it's weird with TV, because it's not like theatre or something where you just watch the audience will clap. It just goes out on TV, but you see Twitter and everything seems pretty positive. So no, it's been a long time coming, and I've been pleased with how it's gone.
Yeah, definitely. I recommend it to anyone who wants to watch it. It's obviously got the human element, like whenever Steve's in the middle of fight night or whatever, and there's a few times I think in the dark he just goes, I need a pint, and it just relates back to all the audience, as they can imagine. When things get stressful, that's all you want to think about. But yeah, recommend it to anyone. Great work from obviously the whole team, and including Emma as well. We thanks for the fact that you portrayed us in that way. It's obviously what we're trying to create, the philosophies of everything that we're about. Four Nations coming up next week as well. We're off to Wales. I'm over there next Thursday, Friday to kick things off, the second Four Nations as well. So more talent coming out of Team England and Ireland, Scotland, Wales, etc. It couldn't have come out at a better time for us, but we enjoyed having you over.
Yeah, thanks very much. And I appreciate you like the whole Emma team was so good to deal with throughout the process, because with filming you never know how people are going to be, if they'll be welcoming or difficult or unresponsive. But Emma welcomed us in, they were keen to have us and made us feel very welcome. So we appreciate that too, because it made up a key part of our program.
Pleasure, mate. Thank you.
Season finale, in fact. So yeah.
Yes, check it out. Sky Documentaries. Thank you very much, mate.
All right, mate. Thanks a lot.